The universe is vast, cold, indifferent. For eons it spun its silent galaxies, birthing stars and swallowing them whole, utterly unaware of the fragile spark clinging to a pale blue dot orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, humanity. We called ourselves that, Homo sapiens. Wise man, a cosmic joke whispered across the void. We were the runts of the galactic litter, the soft-skinned, slow-breathing, oxygen-guzzling anomaly, while the Canthar sculpted nebulae with gravity whips. The mycelian symbiosis wove consciousness through fungal networks spanning light-years, and the crystalline vorlax sang starlight into solid matter. We huddled in our cradle, Sol system, nursing our wounds from self-inflicted near-extinction, barely mastering fusion, dreaming of stars we could never reach. Then they came, not with fanfare, not with declarations. They arrived like the slow creep of frost on a winter window pane, silent, inevitable, chilling. The Hegemony, a coalition of ancient powerful species bound by rigid hierarchy and an unshakable belief in their own ordained supremacy. To them, humanity wasn't a potential ally, a curiosity, or even a threat. We were vermin, an infestation on a strategically located resource-rich system, a biological error to be corrected, efficiently, permanently. The first contact wasn't a handshake. It was an orbital bombardment. Kinetic rods, screaming down from the silent black, turned Luna into a shattered graveyard and scoured the Earth's surface clean of cities. Billions died in the first hour. The sky rained fire and ash. Our fragile unity, forged in the crucible of near-extinction just decades prior, shattered under the Hegemony's boot heel. We were broken, scattered, reduced to feral survivors scrabbling in the radioactive ruins of our own civilization, while sleek, obsidian Hegemony cruisers, shaped like predatory stingrays, patrolled the skies like vultures. This is where our story truly begins. Not in the halls of power, but in the choking dust of what was once Chicago. Commander Aris Thorne adjusted the cracked visor of his scavenged environmental suit. The filters long past their prime. The air tasted of ozone decay and something metallic blood, maybe, or the lingering residue of plasma fire. His eyes, bloodshot and shadowed by exhaustion, scanned the skeletal remains of a skyscraper. Below, in the canyon of rubble, his squad moved like ghosts, 5 souls. All that remained of the 3rd Chicago Irregulars. They weren't soldiers. Not really. Just desperate people who knew how to point a weapon and pull a trigger. Their armor was patched ceramic plates over scavenged polymer. Their rifles jury-rigged relics from the pre-invasion era, modified with scavenged Hegemony power cells that sputtered erratically. Movement. Sector Gamma 7, rasped Lena Rostova, her voice tight through the comms. She crouched behind a twisted girder, her knuckles white on the grip of her pulse rifle. Her face, beneath the grime and streaks of soot, was sharp, fierce, etched with a grief that had hardened into flint. She'd lost her entire family in the initial strikes. Now survival was her only religion. Thorne keyed his mic, his voice low, gravelly. Confirm. Visual. Negative. Thermal bloom. Small. Maybe a scout drone. Or something else. Her paws hung heavy. Something else. The Hegemony didn't just deploy drones. They deployed Reapers, bioengineered horrors, chitinous nightmares with multiple limbs, plasma cannons grafted to their carapaces, and a terrifying, almost insectile intelligence. They hunted in packs, relishing the chase. The terror. Fall back to Rally Point Echo, Thorne ordered. Slow and quiet, assume hostile. They moved like shadows, slipping through the corpse of the city. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of debris underfoot, and the distant, mournful howl of the wind through shattered windows. Thorne's mind raced. Supplies were critically low. Ammo 37 rounds per rifle. Med kits. Empty. Morale, non-existent. They were ghosts haunting their own grave. We were the weakest species alive, he thought. The bitter truth a constant ache in his gut. And now we're just high above the ruined Earth aboard the Hegemony command vessel Unyielding Edict. High Overseer Kalen Voss observed the planet's scarred surface on a panoramic holodisplay. His species, the Velen, were tall, slender beings with obsidian black skin that seemed to drink the light, and multifaceted eyes that glowed with cold, amber intelligence. He wore robes of woven starlight filament, signifying his rank. To Voss, Earth was a problem. A minor, irritating problem, but a problem nonetheless. Status of the Terran Eradication Protocol. Voss's voice was a dry rasp like stones grinding together. It held no malice, only the detached efficiency of a surgeon discussing a routine amputation. Seba Vasir Jaxeril, a younger Veln with nervous energy crackling around his spindly frame, bowed his head. Progress is suboptimal. High Overseer. The Terrans exhibit unexpected resilience. They utilize the ruins for concealment with disturbing efficacy. Their resistance cells, though fragmented, persist. Reaper deployments have yielded diminishing returns. Voss's multifaceted eyes narrowed slightly. Resilience? From Terrans? Preposterous. Their biology is inefficient. Their technology primitive. Their societal structures collapsed under minimal pressure. They are vermin, Jaxerel, vermin that hide in cracks. Increase Reaper patrols. Authorize localized plasma saturation in Sector Theta. Scorch the Earth. Deny them shelter. But High Overseer Jaxerel ventured. A flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, doubt, the energy expenditure, and the potential for collateral damage to the mineral deposits we seek. Collateral damage. Voss's voice dropped, becoming dangerously soft. The only collateral is the continued existence of an inferior species marring a strategically vital system. Scorch it, let the ashes be their monument. We require this system cleansed. He turned back to the display, his gaze fixed on the swirling brown and gray scar that was Earth. Their weakness is absolute, their extinction is inevitable. It is merely a matter of thoroughness. Back in the ruins, Thorne's squad reached Rally Point Echo, a reinforced basement beneath a collapsed library. The air was thick with the smell of damp concrete and desperation. Ben Carter, the squad's medic, a title earned solely by having once watched a first aid tutorial, was trying to staunch the bleeding from Miko Tanaka's leg. A glancing shot from a Reaper's plasma bolt had seared through her armor. Her face was pale, sweat beading on her forehead, but her jaw was clenched tight, refusing to cry out. Pressure. Then. Harder. Lena snapped, her eyes scanning the entrance they'd just sealed with rubble. Her own hands were trembling, not from fear but from the sheer, grinding weight of it all. Thorne knelt beside Miko, placing a hand on her shoulder. Her eyes, wide with pain and fear, locked onto his. Don't let them take me alive, Aris, she whispered, her voice ragged. Not like the others. He knew what she meant. The stories whispered in the dark. Of captives taken by the Reapers. Of the screams that echoed from Hegemony processing centers before they went silent. Of the things the Hegemony did to study Terran biology. I won't, Miko, Thorne promised, his voice thick. I swear it. He looked at Ben. Can you stabilize her? Ben shook his head, his face grim. Infection's already setting in. Without proper meds, she's got hours. Maybe less. He looked away, unable to meet Thorne's gaze. Failure was a familiar companion. Thorne felt the familiar knot of helplessness tighten in his chest. Weakest species. The words echoed Voss's cold assessment. What could they do? Fight the Hegemony? They were ants trying to topple a mountain. He looked at his squad. Lena, fierce but brittle. Ben, skilled but broken by loss. Miko, fading, and the two silent scouts, Davos and Kira, their eyes hollow with the 1,000-yard stare of the perpetually hunted. They were all that was left, and they were dying. Then a low, guttural thrum vibrated through the floor. Not the high-pitched whine of a Reaper drone. Deeper, heavier, closer. Lena's head snapped up, her rifle instantly trained on the sealed entrance. That's not a drone, she breathed, her voice tight with dread. That's a pe-" The thrumming grew louder, shaking loose dust from the ceiling. Scratching sounds, like claws on concrete. Multiple sets. Surrounding, Thorne's blood ran cold. They were cornered, no ammo for a prolonged fight. Miko couldn't run, then was unarmed. Davos and Kira looked ready to bolt, their eyes wide with primal terror. "Seal the inner door," Thorne ordered, his voice surprisingly steady. "Then get Miko behind it. Lena, Devos, Kira, cover the entrance. Use the last of the concussion grenades on my mark." It was a delaying tactic. A death sentence, really. But it was all they had. The scratching intensified. A section of the rubble blocking the entrance groaned, then shifted. Dust rained down. A chitinous limb, black as oil and ending in a wickedly curved talon, snaked through the gap, probing, searching. Lena raised her rifle, her finger tightening on the trigger. Davos whimpered. Kira closed her eyes, whispering a prayer to a god she wasn't sure listened anymore. Thorne braced himself, the image of Earth burning filling his mind. This is it, the end of the weakest species. Then the impossible happened. The thrumming changed. It wasn't just outside anymore. It was everywhere. A deep, resonant vibration that seemed to emanate from the very bones of the planet. The ground beneath them shuddered violently. The chitinous limb froze, then retracted with a startled hiss. Outside, the night sky, usually dominated by the cold pinpricks of stars and the ominous silhouettes of Hegemony patrols, exploded, not with fire, with light. A blinding, emerald-green aurora erupted across the entire hemisphere, pulsing with an energy that felt ancient, primal, alive. It washed over the ruins, over the Hegemony cruisers hanging in low orbit, over the terrified Reapers now scrambling back into the shadows. The comms crackled to life, not with static, but with a voice. Human, female, calm, authoritative, cutting through the chaos like a laser. "Attention all Terran survivors. This is Director Elara Vance, Sol Defense Initiative. The Hegemony's little extermination party. It's over. Stand by. Stand tall. The nightmare is just beginning." The green light pulsed brighter, bathing Thorne's face in its eerie glow. He stared up at the impossible aurora, the voice echoing in his ears. "The nightmare is just beginning? But whose nightmare?" The chitinous limb didn't return. The Reapers were gone, vanished into the suddenly vibrant, terrifyingly alive ruins. The Hegemony cruisers above seemed to hesitate, their predatory grace replaced by confusion. Thorne looked at his squad. Lena's fierce eyes were wide with shock, then dawning desperate hope. Ben stared at the green light as if seeing salvation. Miko managed a weak, pained smile. "We were the weakest species alive," Thorne thought, the old truth crumbling like the ruins around him. "But what are we now?" The green aurora pulsed again, a silent, earth-shaking heartbeat. And deep within the planet's crust, something stirred. End of Part 1. Part 2, The Bloom and the Betrayal. The green aurora wasn't just light. It was a signal. A key turning in a lock buried deep within Earth's geology. A lock humanity hadn't even known existed. In the days that followed Director Vance's broadcast, the impossible became terrifyingly real. The ruins of Earth didn't just shelter survivors, they fought back. Vines, thick as a man's arm and glowing with the same emerald luminescence, erupted from cracks in the pavement, ensnaring Reapers with terrifying speed, crushing chatin and silencing plasma cannons. Patches of irradiated soil bloomed with bioluminescent fungi that released clouds of spores, not poisonous, but disorienting, causing Hegemony sensors to glitch, Reapers to stumble blindly into ambushes. Even the air seemed charged, carrying faint electrical discharges that fried unshielded Hegemony tech. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were adapting, integrating. The planet itself, scarred and poisoned by the Hegemony's assault, was awakening, and it recognized its children. The survivors called it the Bloom. Thorne's squad, miraculously spared that night, became part of the burgeoning resistance. They were evacuated not by ships but through newly formed networks of glowing root tunnels that snaked beneath the ruins. Guided by scouts who seemed to listen to the Earth, they emerged in a hidden valley in the Rockies. Transformed, the air was clean, scented with unfamiliar sweet blossoms. Towering trees with bark like polished obsidian and leaves that shimmered with internal light formed a natural fortress. At its heart stood a structure that defied logic, a fusion of advanced human tech and living, pulsating organic matter, Vance's command center sanctuary. Director Elara Vance was not what Thorne expected. She wasn't a hardened general, but a woman in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that held the weight of impossible choices, and a calm demeanor that radiated absolute authority. Her lab coat was pristine, but her hands were calloused, stained with soil and something that looked suspiciously like bioluminescent sap. "Welcome to the future, Commander Thorne," she said, her voice devoid of the usual wartime rasp, replaced by a quiet intensity. The Hegemony thought they were cleansing a weak species. They didn't understand. They attacked a Deathworld. Deathworld? Thorne echoed, the term unfamiliar. Vance gestured to the vibrant alien beauty surrounding them. The planet so lethally hostile to most life that only the most adaptable, resilient, and aggressive species can survive. Earth wasn't just our home, it was our crucible. Every plague, every ice age, every predator. It forged us, made us tough, made us dangerous. The Hegemony's bombardment? It didn't kill Earth, it woke it up, and it woke us up to what we truly are. She explained the discovery. Deep within Earth's mantle, ancient, dormant bioengineered systems, left by a precursor race long vanished, had been triggered by the extreme stress of the Hegemony's assault. These systems, interfacing with Earth's own hyper-adaptive biosphere and humanity's unique genetic resilience, a product of surviving countless extinction-level events, had initiated Symbiosis Protocol Theta. Humanity wasn't just fighting on Earth, they were becoming part of it. Enhanced strength, accelerated healing, neural links to the planetary network. The Bloom. They were evolving not in generations but in days. Lena, her fierce spirit finding a new purpose, volunteered for the first neural integration trials. Thorne watched, heart pounding, as tendrils of glowing root wrapped around her temples. When she opened her eyes, they held the same fierce fire but now layered with an eerie ancient awareness. She could feel the Reapers moving miles away, sense the Hegemony patrols in orbit. She became their eyes and ears, their living radar. Then the medic found his calling, not just healing wounds, but understanding the Bloom's biochemistry, synthesizing medicines from the new flora that healed Miko's leg infection in hours. Devos and Kira, once hollow-eyed, became expert scouts, moving through the transformed wilderness with an uncanny grace, guided by the planet itself. Hope, fragile but real, began to bloom alongside the emerald vines. Aboard the unyielding Edict, High Overseer Voss watched the reports with growing disbelief, then cold fury. Footage showed Reapers being dragged screaming into the earth by sentient roots. Patrol drones malfunctioning over glowing fungal fields, entire squads vanishing into forests that seemed to breathe. "This is unacceptable," Voss hissed, his obsidian skin seeming to darken further. "Terran vermin do not command planetary-scale bioengineering. This defies all known biological and technological parameters." Sub-Overseer Jaxel presented new data, his nervous energy replaced by a grim fascination. "Analysis suggests interaction. The Terrans are not controlling this phenomenon. High Overseer, they are symbiotic with it. Their neural patterns show integration with the anomalous biosignatures. They are becoming something else." "Something else?" Voss scoffed, but a flicker of unease crossed his multifaceted eyes. "They are still Terrans. Soft, fragile, expendable." He slammed a clawed hand on the console. "Deploy the Scourge. Full spectrum. Level the continent. Vaporize the anomaly at its source." "The Scourge, High Overseer." Jaxrel's voice held genuine alarm. "The energy yield. It would render the entire planetary crust molten. The mineral deposit." "Irrelevant," Voss roared, the sound echoing through the command deck. "If we cannot have this system cleansed and functional, then no one shall have it. Better a dead rock than a nest of abominations. Authorize the Scourge." The warning came not from satellites, but from the Bloom itself. Lena, connected to the network, screamed, collapsing to her knees in Sanctuary's central chamber. They're going to burn it all. A planet killer. Coming now." Panic erupted. Vance's calm shattered. "Evacuation protocols. Full dispersal. Get everyone into the deep root shelters. Now." But it was too late. The sky, once again clear, darkened as a single colossal Hegemony vessel, The Scourge-class dreadnought descended from orbit, blotting out the sun. It wasn't sleek like the cruisers, it was a monstrous engine of annihilation, bristling with energy projectors that began to glow with terrifying building intensity. The air crackled, the very molecules seeming to vibrate with impending doom. Warren grabbed Lena, pulling her towards the nearest root tunnel entrance. "Move! Go!" They ran, the ground trembling beneath the dreadnought's power. Above, the energy projectors reached critical mass. A beam of pure, annihilating white light, wider than a city, lanced down towards the heart of the Bloom, the Sanctuary Valley. This is it, Thorne thought, despair washing over him. All this hope for nothing. But the Bloom didn't accept extinction. As the beam struck, the entire valley exploded upwards. Not with fire, but with a colossal wave of emerald energy, coalescing from the trees, the vines, the very soil. It met the white beam in a cataclysmic collision that lit the hemisphere brighter than a supernova. The shockwave flattened mountains for hundreds of miles. Thorne and Lena were thrown like rag dolls, buried under debris. When Thorne clawed his way free, coughing dust, the world was silent. The dreadnought hung in the sky, its projectors dark, its hull cracked and venting atmosphere. Below, the Sanctuary Valley was gone, obliterated. Only a vast, steaming crater remained. But the Bloom wasn't dead. From the edges of the crater, new shoots were already pushing through the ash. And the emerald light, it was angry. It pulsed with a dark, vengeful rhythm. Vance was gone, presumed vaporized. The resistance was scattered, leaderless, but the Bloom remained. And it was furious. Weeks bled into months. The Hegemony, reeling from the failure of the Scourge and the terrifying resilience of the Bloom, shifted tactics. They stopped trying to eradicate. They started trying to contain. Massive orbital rings, bristling with energy dampeners and sensor nets, were constructed around Earth, designed to suppress the Bloom's planetary-scale manifestations and prevent any escape. Earth became a gilded cage, a zoo for a dangerous, unpredictable specimen. Humanity, scattered and grieving Vance, adapted again. They became ghosts within their own awakened world, using the Bloom's subtle powers, camouflage, localized energy bursts, neural whispers to harass Hegemony patrols, sabotage containment ring components and rescue survivors. Thorne, Lena, Ben, Davos, and Kira became legends. The Ghost Squad. They struck fast, vanished faster, leaving only emerald scorch marks and dead reapers. But the cost was high. Hope curdled into grim determination. The Bloom's anger seeped into them. Lena's eyes, once fierce, now held a chilling emptiness when she spoke of the Hegemony. Ben's healing hands sometimes lingered too long on captured Velen tech, his expression unreadable. Thorne felt the planet's rage humming in his own bones, a constant pressure threatening to crack his resolve. Then a message. Not through the Bloom, through old, encrypted military channels. A plea for help, from inside the primary Hegemony orbital ring. The sender identified themselves only as Jax. Thorne was skeptical. "It's a trap, Voss's pet Velen, luring us in." Lene, however, saw something else. His transmission, it was hesitant. Fearful, not the arrogance of the Hegemony. And he used Vance's old clearance codes. How would he know those? Ben surprisingly sided with Lena. Desperate times. Maybe not all of them are monsters. Against his better judgment, Thorne agreed to a meet. Deep within the ruins of Geneva, beneath the shadow of the massive orbital ring structure, Jaxeril was waiting. He looked diminished. His obsidian skin was dull, his robes torn. He flinched at every sound. When he saw the humans emerge from the shadows, he didn't reach for a weapon. He dropped to his knees. "Please," he rasped, his voice trembling. "You must listen. High Overseer Voss. He has gone beyond containment. He has authorized Project Cleansing Fire." Thorne kept his rifle trained. "What is it?" "A weapon," Jax whispered, his multifaceted eyes wide with terror. "Not kinetic, not energy. Biological, engineered from Terran genetic material, captured during the initial strikes. They've isolated the resilience factor, the Deathworld adaptation. They've weaponized it. Lena's breath hitched. Weaponized us? Yes. Jax Yasserl hissed. A retrovirus, designed to target only Terran DNA, but not to kill, to unmake, to revert the symbiosis, to strip away the Bloom's influence, leaving your bodies weak, vulnerable, and then to trigger a hyper-aggressive, self-destructive cellular cascade. It will turn your own biology against you, make you tear yourselves apart from the inside out. Voss plans to aerosolize it across the entire planet within the week. He calls it poetic justice, using your greatest strength to ensure your final agonizing weakness. The horror of it struck Thorne like a physical blow. To be undone by their own essence, to have the very thing that made them strong, their Deathworld resilience, twisted into the instrument of their utter annihilation. It was diabolical. Why tell us? Thorne demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Why betray your own? Jaxerl looked up, his eyes meeting Thorne's. There was no arrogance there now, only profound shame. Because I saw the reports from the Scourge strike. I saw the Bloom fight back. I saw life. Not vermin, not abominations. Life, fighting for its home, my species. We have forgotten what that feels like. We have become sterile, efficient, dead inside. Voss sees only weakness to be purged. I see something terrifyingly alive, and I cannot be party to its murder. He bowed his head. The primary dispersal hub is on ring segment Gamma. I have access codes, coordinates. But I cannot stop it alone, and they will kill me if they discover my betrayal. A tense silence hung in the ruined chamber. The Bloom's emerald light pulsed faintly on the walls, seeming to watch, to judge. Thorne looked at Lena. Her face was a mask of cold fury, but her eyes held a flicker of the old fire, the fire that protected, not just destroyed. He looked at Ben, whose hands were clenched, thinking of the healing he'd done, the life he'd saved. Now threatened by this perversion, Davos and Kira stood ready, their loyalty unquestioning. The weakest species, facing annihilation not by brute force but by the perversion of their own soul. Thorne lowered his rifle slightly. Show us the way, Jaxero. The Vel nodded, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. Thank you. The hub, it's heavily guarded, but there is a secondary access point. Through the old CERN tunnels, they run directly beneath the ring's foundation. As they moved through the ruins towards the hidden entrance, Thorne felt the Bloom's anger surging within him, a tidal wave of protective fury. But beneath it something else stirred. Not just rage, purpose. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore, they were fighting for the right to be the terrifying, resilient, Deathworld species they had become. They reached the entrance to the CERN tunnels, a rusted maintenance hatch. Jaxerl input the codes. The hatch hissed open, revealing darkness. Remember, Jaxer whispered, once inside the ring structure, my access is limited. The final chamber, you will need to bypass the biolocks. They are keyed to Velan physiology. Lena stepped forward, her eyes glowing faintly emerald in the dim light. We'll manage, she said, her voice echoing with the hum of the Bloom. Lead on. They descended into the darkness, the weight of Earth's fate pressing down on them. The tunnel was cold, damp, smelling of ozone and old metal. The distant thrum of the orbital ring vibrated through the walls. They moved silently, Jaxerl guiding them through labyrinthine service corridors. Alarms blared in the distance. Hegemony patrols. They pressed themselves into shadows, hearts pounding. The Bloom's network, strained by the ring's dampeners, offered only faint whispers of danger. But it was enough. They avoided patrols, disabled security drones with precise bursts of emerald energy channeled through Lena. Finally, they reached a massive blast door. Ring segment Gamma. Primary dispersal hub. This is it, Jaxerl breathed. The biolocks. Lena stepped forward, placing her hand on the scanner. It glowed red. Invalidate species. Stand back, Thorne ordered. He raised his rifle, modified with Bloom Tech capacitors. A searing bolt of emerald energy lanced out, melting the lock mechanism. The door groaned, then slid open. Inside was a nightmare of science. Vats of swirling, viscous fluid pulsed with sickly green light. The retrovirus conduits snaked across the ceiling, leading to massive aerosol dispersers aimed at Earth below, and standing before the central control console flanked by elite Reaper guards was High Overseer Voss. He turned, his multifaceted eyes blazing with cold triumph. Mars, the vermin and the traitor. Punctual. How quaint. Jaxrill froze, terror etching his features. Voss. Silence, worm, Voss spat. Your betrayal is noted. Your execution will be exemplary. He gestured to the Reapers. Seize them, prepare the traitor for neural extraction. The vermin, feed them to the dispersers. Let them be the first test subjects for their own undoing. The Reapers advanced, plasma cannons humming to life. Thorne raised his rifle. Lena's eyes blazed with emerald fire. Then Davos and Kira took up defensive positions. Jaxrill stood paralyzed, caught between his species and his conscience. It was a standoff. Hopeless. Outgunned. Surrounded. Voss smiled, a chilling stretch of his lipless mouth. You see? Your weakness is absolute. Your defiance, meaningless. Project cleansing fire initiates in T-5 minutes. Watch your world die, Terrans. Watch it die because of what you are. He turned back to the console, his clawed fingers hovering over the activation sequence. Thorne knew they couldn't win a firefight. Not here. Not now. But Lena's eyes met his. In them, he saw not just fury, but a terrifying, desperate plan. She looked at the vats of retrovirus, then at the conduits leading to the dispersers. She looked at the Bloom's faint emerald light clinging to the walls of the chamber. The Bloom is angry, Thorne realized, but it's also connected. To us, to the planet, to everything. He saw what Lena intended. It was insane. Suicidal. But it was the only play. Jaxrill? Thorne yelled, his voice cutting through the tension. The dampeners. Can you disable the ring's dampeners? Just for a second? Jaxrill, startled, looked at the console Voss stood at. The main dampener controls. They're linked. But, yes, a manual override. It would cause a massive feedback surge. It could destroy the ring segment. Do it, Thorne roared. On my mark. Voss whirled around, snarling. Fools? Stop them? The Reapers opened fire. Plasma bolts seared the air. Thorne dove behind a console. Lena rolled, firing emerald bolts that shattered Reaper carapaces, then dragged Jaxrill towards the dampener override panel. Davos and Kira laid down covering fire, their modified rifles spitting defiance. Now, Lena, Thorne bellowed. Lena didn't hesitate. She slammed her hands onto the nearest conduit leading from the retrovirus vat. She closed her eyes, pouring every ounce of her will, her connection to the Bloom, into the conduit. She wasn't trying to destroy the virus. She was trying to connect it, to link the weaponized Terran DNA within it, back to the source, back to the planetary network, back to Earth. At the same moment, Jaxrill, with a cry of terror and resolve, slammed his fist onto the dampener override. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The orbital ring's energy dampeners flickered and died. For one glorious, terrifying second, the Bloom's full power surged upwards, unimpeded. And Lena, acting as a conduit, channeled that raw planetary fury into the retrovirus. The vats didn't explode. They bloomed. The sickly green fluid erupted, not as an aerosol but as a wave of pure emerald life. It surged through the conduits, not towards the dispersers but backwards, into the ring's own systems. The retrovirus, designed to unmake Terran life, was instantly overwhelmed, rewritten, consumed by the Bloom's raw, adaptive power. It became something else, something more. The emerald wave hit the Reapers. Their chitinous bodies didn't melt, they sprouted. Vines burst from their joints. Glowing fungi bloomed on their carapaces. Their plasma cannons choked with vibrant living matter. They shrieked, not in pain but in a horrifying fusion of organic and mechanical agony, before collapsing into steaming mounds of fertile soil and luminous flowers. The wave hit Voss. He screamed, a sound of utter disbelief and terror, as emerald light engulfed him. His obsidian skin cracked, not with damage, but with the pressure of growth. Tiny, glowing leaves unfurled from his joints. His multifaceted eyes clouded over with bioluminescent moss. He wasn't being killed. He was being assimilated, turned into a monument of the very life he sought to destroy. The wave hit the ring structure itself. Metal groaned, conduits burst, not with sparks but with cascading waterfalls of glowing pollen. The massive dispersers twisted and warped, becoming grotesque, beautiful sculptures of metal and vine. The feedback surge from the dampener override ripped through the ring segment. Alarms shrieked a death knell. The floor buckled. The ceiling cracked, raining debris. "Get out!" Thorne yelled, grabbing Luna, who was slumped against the conduit, drained but alive. Ben hauled Jaxirel, who stared in horrified awe at the assimilating Voss. Davos and Kira covered their retreat. They ran, the ring segment collapsing around them, the emerald light of the corrupted retrovirus pulsing like a dying star. They barely made it back to the CERN tunnel entrance, as the entire gamma segment tore itself apart in a silent explosion of light and life, visible even from the surface. They emerged onto the ruined surface of Geneva, gasping. Above, the orbital ring was broken, a gaping wound in its structure glowing with unnatural emerald light. The Bloom's pulse across the planet felt different. Stronger, sharper, hungry. They had stopped Project Cleansing Fire, but the cost was immense. Sanctuary was gone. Vance was gone. And the Bloom had tasted the Hegemony's technology, their biology. It had changed. Lena looked up at the shattered ring, her eyes reflecting the emerald glow. "We stopped them," she whispered, her voice raw. "But what have we become?" Thorne looked at his hands. They felt stronger. The air felt sharper. The hum of the Bloom in his bones was louder, more insistent. It wasn't just protecting Earth anymore, it was expanding, reaching out. He looked at Jaxiril, the Vel who had betrayed his kind for a spark of conscience, now standing amidst the ruins of his people's arrogance, covered in the ash of their hubris. The weakest species had survived. But the nightmare had only just begun to spread. End of Part 3. The final Bloom. The shattered orbital ring hung like a broken crown above Earth, a testament to the Hegemony's failed arrogance and humanity's terrifying metamorphosis. But the victory was Pyrrhic. Sanctuary was ash. Director Vance, the architect of their hope, was gone. And the Bloom was no longer just Earth's guardian. It was hungry. The emerald light pulsed with a new rhythm, a rhythm that echoed not just across the planet but outward, into the void. The retrovirus, corrupted and supercharged by the Bloom's planetary consciousness, hadn't just been neutralized. It had become a vector, a seed. Spores invisible to Hegemony sensors drifted on solar winds from the shattered ring segment, carried on the debris of the gamma segment's destruction. They drifted towards the Hegemony fleet, still holding position at the edge of the solar system. Thorne felt it. A constant, low thrum in his blood, a pressure behind his eyes. The Bloom wasn't just in the soil and the vines anymore, it was in them. Deeper, more integrated. Strength surged through his muscles, healing minor scrapes instantly. His senses were preternaturally sharp. He could smell fear on the wind, hear the heartbeat of a mouse 3 blocks away. Lena's connection was even stronger. She could now influence the Bloom, directing vines, accelerating growth, feeling the spores as they drifted towards the Hegemony ships. Ben discovered he could manipulate the Bloom's biochemistry on a cellular level, not just heal but enhance. Harden skin, accelerate neural pathways. Davos and Kira moved with impossible speed and silence. Shadows given form. They were becoming something new, something the universe had never seen. Not just humans, not just symbionts, Deathworlders ascendant, but the cost was etched on their faces. Lena's eyes held a chilling emptiness when she spoke of the Hegemony, a cold fury that bordered on the inhuman. Ben's hands, once gentle healers, now sometimes trembled with the raw power he could unleash. Thorne felt the Bloom's rage as his own, a constant temptation to lash out, to consume. The line between protector and predator was blurring. Aboard the Hegemony flagship Sovereign Will, chaos reigned. Reports flooded in from the fleet. Crew members on ships near the Sol perimeter were falling ill, not with a virus, but with growth. Bioluminescent fungi sprouted from ventilation shafts. Vines snaked through corridors, crushing bulkheads. Crew members reported hearing whispers in the walls, feeling an unnatural warmth in the metal. Panic spread faster than the emerald spores. High Command, reeling from Voss's assimilation and the loss of the Gamma segment, was paralyzed. The Hegemony had faced countless threats, rebellious colonies, ancient weapons, cosmic anomalies, but never this. Never a planet that fought back by turning its very attackers into part of itself. Never a species that weaponized its own weakness into an unstoppable adaptive plague of life. They made their decision. Not containment. Not negotiation. Annihilation. The entire Hegemony fleet, hundreds of vessels from a dozen species, began to converge on Sol. Not to occupy. To sterilize. To unleash a barrage of relativistic kinetic kill vehicles, RKVs, and antimatter warheads capable of shattering Earth into an asteroid belt. They would leave nothing, not even dust. Thorne stood on a ridge overlooking the Pacific, now a churning, emerald-tinged expanse. The Bloom's network screamed a warning. Incoming. Many. Dead. Lena stood beside him, her eyes closed, her face a mask of concentration. They're coming, Aris. All of them. They mean to erase us. Erase everything. Then joined them, holding a vial of swirling emerald fluid, the concentrated essence of the Bloom, distilled from the corrupted retrovirus. This is our only chance. We can't stop their fleet with rifles and vines. But this, he looked at the vial, his expression grim. It's a catalyst, a key. If we can get it onto their command ship, into their central systems, it could trigger a Bloom cascade, Lena finished, her voice flat. Turn their entire fleet into gardens. Or it could do nothing, Thorne said. The weight of the decision crushing him. Or it could consume us in the process. This power, it's changing us, Lena. Are we still human? Or are we just extensions of the Bloom now? Lana opened her eyes. They glowed with an inner emerald fire. Does it matter, Aris? They tried to unmake us. They tried to turn our strength into our weakness. Now, we show them what true strength looks like. We show them the nightmare they created. She looked at Jack Cyril, who stood a few paces away watching the horizon with haunted eyes. Even your people, Jack Cyril. They chose this path. They made us monsters. Now they will face them. Jack Cyril flinched, but didn't argue. He had seen the assimilation of Voss. He understood the terrifying, beautiful horror of the Bloom. He had chosen his side. The plan was desperate. Suicidal. Thorne, Lena, and Ben would take the only functional pre-invasion stealth shuttle they'd salvaged, dubbed the Moth, and infiltrate the Sovereign Will. Davos and Kira would lead the surface resistance in a massive, distracting assault on the remaining orbital ring segments, drawing the fleet's fire. Jack Cyril would use his residual access codes to create a brief window in the flagship's shields. As the Moth launched, silent and dark against the bruised twilight sky, Thorne looked back at Earth. It was no longer the pale blue dot. It was a world wreathed in emerald fire, pulsing with a life that was both beautiful and terrifying. Our home, he thought. Our weapon. Our curse. The Hegemony fleet filled the void ahead. A wall of cold metal and lethal intent. The Sovereign Will loomed at its center. A city-sized dagger pointed at Earth's heart. Jack Cyril's voice crackled over the comms, strained but clear. Shield frequency modulation. Now. You have a 10-second window. Go. The Moth shot forward, slipping through the microscopic gap in the flagship's defenses like a ghost. Alarms blared inside the shuttle as proximity alerts screamed, Hegemony fighters scrambling. Then get ready, Thorne yelled, wrestling the controls. Lena, guide us. Lena's eyes were closed, her hands pressed against the shuttle's hull. Left. Hard left. Now dive. Corridor Gamma 9. It's clear. They skimmed the massive hull of the Sovereign Will, dodging point defense lasers that seared the vacuum. They found a maintenance airlock, blown open by Lena's focused will. The Moth docked with a shuddering clang. Inside, the flagship was a maze of sterile gray corridors. But already the emerald spores had taken hold. Faint green veins pulsed beneath the metal floor. The air hummed with a low, organic thrum. They moved fast, then clutching the vial of Bloom essence like a holy relic. Hegemony's security drones swarmed, but Lina's connection disrupted their sensors, and Thorne's enhanced strength crushed them with brutal efficiency. They fought not like soldiers, but like forces of nature, silent, relentless, terrifyingly effective. They reached the central command nexus, a vast chamber dominated by a holographic star map, showing the converging fleet and the targeting solutions locked onto Earth. High Command officers, a mix of Vel and other Hegemony species, turned in shock as the humans burst in. "Seal the chamber," roared the acting High Commander, a hulking Vorlax whose crystalline body refracted the emergency lights. Bulkheads slammed shut. Security forces poured in. "Ben, now!" Thorne bellowed, laying down covering fire with his Bloom-enhanced rifle, each shot punching through armor. Ben didn't hesitate. He sprinted towards the central data core, a pulsating column of light and crystal. He smashed the vial against it. The effect was instantaneous and apocalyptic. The emerald essence didn't just spread, it detonated. A wave of pure, living energy erupted from the core, engulfing the command chamber. Metal bulkheads bloomed with vines and luminous fungi. Crystalline Vorlax bodies fractured, not shattering but sprouting glowing crystalline flowers. Vel officers screamed as their obsidian skin split, revealing pulsating root-like structures beneath. The holographic star map dissolved into a swirling vortex of emerald light. The Bloom cascade had begun, but it wasn't contained. The wave shot through the ship's data conduits, through its life support, through its very structure. The sovereign will began to change. Hull plates warped into leaf-like structures, weapon emplacements choked with vines. The bridge became a cathedral of glowing living matter. Outside, the effect rippled through the fleet. Ships that had absorbed the spores began to convulse. Lights flickered, replaced by bioluminescent pulses. Hulls bulged and split, revealing forests growing in the vacuum. Crews were assimilated, turned into silent, rooted sentinels, draped in emerald moss. The coordinated barrage aimed at Earth faltered, then dissolved into chaos as ships turned on each other, not out of malice but because their systems were being rewritten by the Bloom. Earth was saved, not by weapons, but by life itself. Thorne, Lina, and Ben stood on the bridge of the transforming sovereign will, now a grotesque, beautiful garden adrift in space. Below them, Earth pulsed with triumphant emerald light. The Hegemony fleet was a graveyard of blooming metal and assimilated life, but the victory felt hollow, cold. Lina looked at her hands. Tiny, glowing rootlets were beginning to trace patterns beneath her skin. She felt the Bloom's consciousness pressing in, not just around her but within her. It wanted to expand, to reach out, to touch the stars, to consume. Ben slumped against a console now sprouting luminous blue flowers. It's in me too," he whispered, his voice thick with fear. "It's changing us, making us part of it." Thorne felt it too. The rage was gone, replaced by a vast alien calm, a sense of purpose that wasn't his own. The Bloom saw the universe not as a place to live but as a garden to be cultivated. And it saw humanity not as its children but as its first, most effective gardeners, its tools. He looked at Lina, her eyes now almost entirely emerald, the human spark fading. He looked at Ben, his skin taking on a faint, bark-like texture. He looked out at the blooming fleet, a silent testament to their power and their loss. They had won. They had become the universe's final nightmare. But in doing so, had they lost themselves? Then a new signal, faint, desperate, coming from the edge of the solar system, not Hegemony. Something else. Lina's head snapped up, her emerald eyes focusing on the distant stars. "A ship," she breathed, her voice echoing with the Bloom's hum. "Small, damaged, running silent. It's human." Thorne's heart lurched. Survivors? From before the invasion? From another colony? The signal resolved into a visual, a battered, ancient-looking vessel. its hull scarred but intact. The registry was faded, but legible. UES Odyssey, a deep-range exploration ship, lost decades ago, presumed destroyed. As it limped into view, a transmission crackled over the comms. A human voice, weak but clear, filled with awe and terror. Sola Command, this is Captain Anya Rostova of the UES Odyssey. We've been gone 70 years. We found something out there, in the Oort cloud. Something big, something alive. And it's waking up. It's coming here. The voice cut out, replaced by static. Thorne, Lena, and Ben stared at the viewscreen. The Odyssey hung in the void, a tiny speck against the backdrop of the blooming Hegemony fleet and the emerald earth. The bloom within them surged, not with fear but with recognition and hunger. The nightmare they had become, it was not the end. It was merely the beginning. The universe was vaster, stranger, and far more dangerous than the Hegemony had ever imagined. And Earth, the Deathworld, the cradle of nightmares, was no longer hiding. It was ready. Thorne placed a hand on the console, feeling the pulse of the bloom through the metal through his own bones. He looked at Lena, her emerald eyes meeting his, reflecting the same terrifying understanding. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were the vanguard, the first bloom in a garden that would soon cover the stars. He keyed the comms, his voice calm, resonant with the power of the planet and the void. Captain Rostova, this is Commander Aris Thorne of Earth. Welcome home. Tell us everything. Outside, the emerald light of the bloom pulsed brighter, reaching out towards the distant unknown threat. The weakest species was gone. In its place stood something new. Something ancient, something that would make the universe remember the name of Earth, not with fear of its weakness but with terror of its strength. The final nightmare had arrived, and it was just getting started.